week in review. We're going to be looking at the trading week of October 27th, 2025. We'll get that out of the way. It is a very significant week as far as some of the data being released and earnings. And we have some news this weekend. It's Sunday at about 3:45 Eastern time for me as I'm recording this. We have a lot of news that's come out this weekend about trade deals and whatnot with Trump and China. So it's going to be interesting to see how this market opens and how that news is reacted upon. So it's quite possible we have a pretty significant move right off Globex with everything that came out this weekend. So starting off with data, Monday we don't have anything major. Tuesday we have consumer confidence at 10 a.m. as well as the Richmond Manufacturing Index. Whether or not consumer confidence comes out, I'm not sure because of the government shutdown, so we'll have to see. Wednesday is a big one, so 2 p.m. So 10 a.m. pending home sales, 2 p.m. we have the FOMC rate decision. So what's currently priced into the market right now is a 25 basis point cut. That's what's expected. And then 2:30 p.m. we have the FOMC presser as we normally do afterwards. So we'll have to look out for what Powell says in the statement that's released, as well as how he perceives to answer questions. That should affect whether or not we see swaps move for potentially another rate cut for December. At the moment, December is still pricing a cut as well, so it'll be interesting to see if those move. Thursday, we have GDP at 8:30 a.m. And again, same thing. I'm not sure if it's going to be released because of the shutdown. It is in the calendar, but who knows. And then Friday, we have no major data. It is Halloween, so that's cool. But we have PCE, but again, I don't think that's going to be released because of the government shutdown. It's on the calendar, but we'll have to see. So as far as earnings goes, it's huge. We have about 35% of the S&P 500 reporting this week is from a cap size perspective. The big ones, I think, that are going to be significant for the market are obviously Wednesday, Thursday. Ones I'm paying attention to Tuesday after hours will be Enphase as well as Visa. And then Wednesday before market open, we have Boeing and Caterpillar. Caterpillar is really interesting to me right now, especially with all the rare earth talk and that sector heating up and potentially having some big movement coming with some of the talks that we've had this weekend. So I'm actually quite focused on that right now. From an equity perspective, after close Wednesday, Meta, Microsoft, and Google, obviously massive market movers. So Wednesday after close will be very significant for short-term direction of this market. And then Thursday, again, after close, very significant, Amazon and Apple, Coinbase to an extent, but Amazon and Apple will be, again, very significant for the market on Thursday. So we'll have to see. As far as directional bias, tricky because, we have so much data coming out this week, but as far as how higher time frames are looking right now, we made some pretty significant moves last week. So you'll recall that we were trading in that trading range for quite some time. So even if we pull up the S&P 500, this is probably the easiest way to visualize this. This huge liquidation range we had from October 10th, we traded inside of this week, inside of this range until last Friday when we finally had a true gap higher, which never got filled, and we closed the daily and the weekly above it. So from a higher time frame perspective for the S&P, as well as the NASDAQ, the monthly, the weekly, and the daily are all one time framing higher. So buyers remain in control of the higher time frame auctions. And what we want to focus on this week, or at least what I want to focus on this week, is whether or not there's going to be continued acceptance outside of that prior balance range that we broke out of, which is also Friday's RTH low, basically exactly. So the big thing for me, just to keep this really simple this week, is are we able to stay outside of 68.10s? Do we leave this true gap higher open? Do we have no interest in selling below this? And if that's the case, then this is just going to be a continued discovery bid, and I'll be looking for the poor high from Friday, which was quite exhaustive, but the poor high from Friday to be corrected. So ultimately looking at a target of 68.41s, and then looking at the 25 and 50% balance extensions up into 68.60 into 6900s. And again, if this market wants to do something stupid, especially with all this news coming out, especially with potential earnings, decent earnings coming out, we could see this easily ramp much higher than this too. So As far as the big thing for me, really, it's just focusing on, we had a true gap higher, which never got filled. We have a poor high, which needs to be corrected at some point in time. That's obviously a target on the long side. But the big thing for me is, do we hold Friday's low? Do we hold outside of that gap? Do we hold that gap and go? Do we continue higher? And if that's the case, if we have acceptance, either if we have, a dip down into the 6,800 to 6,785 range, which is the top of last week's value area high, I will be looking for, decent lows down here to see if they're going to form. And if they do, again, it's just going to be a long trade and long continuation trade. Any acceptance above Friday's high, so if we're seeing time and volume get put in above Friday's high, if we're seeing no real ability of sellers to take this back down, if we're seeing no interest in selling this back down, if we're seeing shallow retraces, shallow dips get instantly bought above Friday's high, then again, it's just staying long intraday, and I'll be looking for these targets at 68.60 and 69.12s to, higher potentially. We'll have to see. So the short trade for me, I think the only real short trade this week I'd be looking for is a failure under the gap that we put in last week. So if we're seeing, if another tweet comes out or if more news comes out, who knows what it's going to be. If we see, a lot of volume get dumped back below prior weekly balance, so back below that huge trading range that we put in, back below the RTH gap, so basically a failure below the unfilled RTH gap at 67.80s to last week's POC at 67.70s, then we could potentially start to talk about a look above and fail of prior balance, and that would potentially force a liquidation lower, and we'd be looking for targets to traverse last week's value back to the open as well at 67.30s, and then look potentially lower all the way to the bottom of that balance range down into 6700s, that weekly POC, that prior weekly low target, as well as down into 6640s to 6590s. So really, I don't have a reason to look short on this market. I'm going to talk about the NASDAQ in a second and what happened there, but I don't have a reason to look short on this market, especially with this breakout of balance, unless we're very clearly cutting back through this low volume area and we start falling under last week's primary distribution and last week's POC. So if we start failing below 67.70s, then we can start talking about the inventory that's sitting above this, and we can start talking about potential acceleration lower. Until we do that, I don't have a reason to look short on a bigger picture perspective on this market. There's going to be intraday rotations both sides, but again, I think focus for me is going to be looking for those long trades on good lows and looking for potential acceleration above last week's high up into potentially all the way up into 6900s. So that's how I'm going to play this. I'm going to try and keep it really simple. NASDAQ had a warning shot. We had blues print. Now the big thing for this, and I've talked about this in prior videos, is the way these work and the way these are based is on a settlement basis. So it wasn't really surprising to me intraday to see these start to fire as we tried to break away from this weekly balance just based on the tape, because that's what they're based on. We ended up closing above, and we ended up invalidating these blues. So as much as I'd love to say, I have a reason to look short on the NASDAQ, I don't. And again, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same thing as the S&P as it is for the NASDAQ. So we broke out of a huge weekly balance range. We broke out of that giant liquidation range that we put in. So again, if we want to visualize this, I'll just go to a daily chart here just so you can see. This massive liquidation on October 10th that set this big weekly balance range, we were able to close the day and the week above it. So until we're losing this range, again, until we're back below last week's primary distribution and last week's POC, until I see this true gap higher fail and I see volume and acceptance, which is time and volume, below last week's POC, below the gap up, then we can start talking about lower. If we start seeing, a dip below and we see good lows form, we see a lot of absorption down into the bid, and then we see the book flip and lift start to take us back higher. Again, I'll be looking to see if we have good lows form in here for the long reversal trade and get us back up into some of these extensions of weekly balance. The early pivot, I think that's easy. That's going to be easy to use. And again, we could see a gap very easily when we open Globex because of that news that we have would be 25 500s. It's extremely active on tape all day Friday. So again, that's going to be a quick pivot for me. But the big thing is, do we hold above this gap, this true gap higher, which was never filled, this huge low volume node that we have? Do we have any ability to sell back below this and start accepting back below last week's POC, which could force a liquidation lower? If we don't see that, again, I don't have a reason to look short on this market, and I'll look for those long continuation trades back up into 25 600s and ultimately up into 25 900s and potentially a lot higher. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what Globex does. We'll have to see how Monday RTH opens. That's going to be very interesting, as well as if we get any more information. If we do see volume and acceptance back below the gap, back below last week's POC, then we could see the value traverse easily back down into the major pivot of 25, call it 25K, but I have 25 30s. And then again, we have two naked POCs lower, which we should note that will get filled at some point. I don't know when, but we have a naked POC down into 24 770s as well. And Thursdays, I should say, Thursday's POC is also naked at 25 147s. So if we fail below this, easy targets, 25 140s, and then eventually down into 24 780s. But until we're offering below this big gap up, until we're failing the breakaway from weekly balance, that huge liquidation range, no real reason, in my opinion, to look short in this market. From an equity perspective, I remain very long. I've added to some names in the last couple of weeks as well. So hopefully, bigger picture for me, I'd like us to continue going up because those names will continue going up. So that'd be nice. But from an intraday trading perspective, the big thing really is, do we hold outside that balance range, and can we continue to see those drives higher? So gonna leave it there. It's gonna be a big week, a lot of data, a lot of earnings, a lot of things that could change your plan very, very quickly. I'm very open to pivoting quickly if we have some news that comes out, or if we have a market nuke on earnings potentially. We don't know the outcomes of what that's going to be. I don't have any red flags in my opinion about looking for big liquidation moves until really we see this breakout fail. That's a big thing. So I think a lot of people are probably going to try and force the short, especially if we gap up. I think a lot of people probably took some hedges into the weekend, which is entirely fair. If you're managing your portfolio correctly, a lot of people just blindly short it. But the big thing is really, I don't think we have any reason to look for that unless we fail balance. So this video helps at all. Like the video, I appreciate it. If you have any comments, leave them down in the comments section. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.